So my name's Dominic Campbell. I run a company called FutureGov. Helpfully, as if we planned it, my presentation probably brings together the last two presentations quite nicely and in a slightly different context around the work that we do in government, as you might imagine from our name. Just to that last question, I just threw this in before I came up on the stage about how you can do different rapid prototyping and service as well as product. This was in a town square in the middle of Moldova, in the capital city that I can't pronounce the name of, where we were designing a police station, a new police station, and which is a bit odd for a digital agency, granted. But just when you think that paper prototyping is the only way you can rapidly test a service, this is the reenactment of the police's desire to have an open plan office, and us using a prototype to demonstrate that might not quite work when there is a woman reporting domestic abuse and a geezer looking over his shoulder, listening in. I mean, it was a bit of an extreme example, but anyway, so that's just a service. So this is not in Moldova, this is in North London where I cut my teeth. So I am not a service designer or a designer by background. I'm a bureaucrat. I cut my teeth. I'm probably the only person you'll ever meet who desperately wanted to work in local government from the age of 14. Judge me, it's fine. I'm used to it. And so 20 odd years later, I'm still in the game and loving it. So this is where I learned all about local public services generally. Not the most innovative looking building you might ever come across, and one that is necessarily designed to bring citizen engagement into public services. It's much more about politicians sitting on that top floor there behind the glass looking down on their serfs, rather than necessarily encouraging engagement and interaction in public service. I think the theme of my talk, really, in the background of the really intelligent things I'm going to say, is probably just you need to really have some guile and some real resilience if you want to become a designer in public services. It kind of chews you up and spits you out if you're not careful. And to be honest, it's worth it. Like there is nothing more satisfying than knowing that you've done something truly meaningful with your skill set. We've done a really good trade in attracting amazing talent since Brexit and Trump, as we have developers, designers, and others collapse at our doorstep and say, what the fuck have I been doing with my life? Why am I not changing something that means something, which is great. So people have caught my bug. I knew I was right when I was a kid. It just took 20 years for people to cotton on to how cool local government is. So the reason I left local government was actually mostly to try and change it from a different angle. So my background was policy and then into organizational transformation, and that was in an age of this stuff. Which is all too common still, of implementing horrendous enterprise technology, where you feel immediately guilty for imposing this on people. But you didn't really know. I mean, this was 10, 15 years ago, and so I didn't really know any better. I just felt in my gut that this was mad and really needed to change it. So that was how I fell out of government 10 years ago and set up FutureGov as a way of trying to bring what I didn't know was then design and digital even into public services. As you imagine 10 years ago, trying to persuade local government that there was a thing called the internet that was more than their shit website, and they might need to think a bit more about it, was pretty hard, given things like Twitter didn't really even exist then. And then when it did, you'd be like, look, Twitter's great. And they're like, what the fuck has this got to do? I'm doing child protection, dude. Like, leave me alone. So it's taken a while. So now we're a team of about 40. We're based in London, up at Angel. And I'll come back to our sort of three-pronged approach, which comes on quite nicely from the last two talks, really, which is becoming a bit normal. Like 5, 6, 8 years ago, when we started talking about how you need to come at change in big organizations from more than one of these angles, people were like, nah, it's cool, we got it. Management consultants and big technology, that's fine. That'll work for us. Still now, 70% of all government IT projects fail. in terms of either never go live, overspend, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not quite sure that model is working as such, which is why we're around. So as I say, we work all over the place. We've got an office in London and one in Australia, and then weirdly seem to work on the flight path in between, as if we fall out the plane en route. And a lot of what we talk about is super obvious to the people in this room, but what we spend most of our life doing is trying to raise the expectations of government, I would say, more than anything. Try and get them to believe again that government can be more than this sort of receiving the end of the shit stick from the technology sector, and actually can own its own destiny and do some really great things. There is nothing more important than bringing all of the modern innovations to something like child protection or looking after our elderly parents. Yet all the experience of people that government serves is you're wandering through the internet in a wonderful user experience on the whole, and then all of a sudden you fall off a cliff into some user experience ghetto, and you know that you're on a .gov.uk website generally, and you're like, oh, for the love of God, I'll be here for the next half an hour. And it's extremely frustrating for people because this is their lived reality, and then they're just like, dudes, like, organizations don't look different on the internet. It's quite flattening as a technology. Like, you should all feel and look the same. Why do I have to do all the work just because you call yourself government? I don't even know what that is. Will you just get your shit together? So we spend a lot of our time trying to get them to meet that expectation gap. And there is a lot of good work going on in this area now. When we started in 2008, government digital service didn't exist, and that's definitely brought a lot of legitimacy because there's a place that has a Queen's crown on it, that then you can say, well, if the Queen gets it, then why aren't you Agile? So that helps. But for us, like, there's a lot of frustration. So our heritage, our DNA is in local government, and that's the government that you will all know, to be honest. It's the stuff that really impacts people's lives. Central government is a little less interesting to us. It's really remarkable and amazing and fun and important to change as well, but a lot of that is actually so intransigent to change because of the huge monolith. Like, there's 80,000 people that work in DWP, for instance, and they've all got permanent secretaries and ministers that go to cabinet meetings, and they've all got heavy, heavy silos that are as political as you would imagine. And so really the strategy in central government is put a digital wrapper around that chaos to try and make the experience less crap. But that isn't the same as changing the public services under the surface of that digital experience. It's all well and good, but we've got a website that we should have built 10 years ago, and it's just taken us until 2017 to have gov.uk. What isn't changing really is the institutions underneath it, and that's what really, really interests me. Partly because you look at all those other innovations that I had up earlier, and they've disrupted the taxi industry, they've disrupted the book industry, they've done whatever they've done. And government almost sits there and says, well, that ain't gonna happen to us. Like, we got a monopoly, we're government. Like, we pickpocket people for taxes, whether they like it or not. We spend it on good stuff. Like, we're sorted. We're never gonna be disrupted. And it just isn't true. But then on the other hand as well, like, I don't think we want to go down the line of like some kind of belief that all that sort of techno-utopian bullshit is actually changing the world, because it isn't, unless we put it to good use. Like, I have a firmly held belief that Silicon Valley adds value to the world, but only if we take it off them and use it for meaningful things. If we just leave it in this sort of techno-utopian 3D printed lazy unicorn robot nonsense, what are we solving? Like, but it also doesn't mean that government shouldn't use those robots to help our elderly people if they're worth it and if they're beneficial. And that's how we should be thinking in government. Partly also because government, like, the private sector has the luxury of thinking about the 80% of people who have cash in their pocket and can spend it on delivery. Ridiculous people like me who live in Hackney and really should just get off their arse and go and buy some food and cook it, but instead use Deliveroo all the time. They have that luxury of appealing to me. Government doesn't have that audience. Like, they're the other way around. They are all about the 20% of people who don't have access to these services, who haven't got the cash, who haven't got the lifestyle. They're about the safety net for our society. And so whilst you want the benefit of what comes out of those services and the design and the innovation, the actual business model and the sort of change doesn't happen because Uber doesn't give a toss about rural communities, like dispersed people living all over the place across fields, and oh my God, are we actually going to make any money out of this thing? Right, don't do rural. Let's just stick to Hackney. Whereas like councils have to care about everybody, and they have to care particularly about the most vulnerable in our society. So how do we support people who, like Margaret, who are left behind when their rural bus service gets pulled because it's uneconomic? Or how do we help these clients that we've worked with in Surrey to help bring some of the benefits of the elegant Airbnb experience, but to something meaningful, like getting his mum into a decent care home, and improving the customer experience, but also the end product, i.e. the place that she lives and the experience that she has every day, which has absolutely nothing to do with the website that we wrap around government. And what we say to government is like, this is going to happen to you. Like everything in government takes 10 or 20 years longer than it happens in the private sector because of their conservatism, because of their monopoly. But they think that this isn't going to happen, that they're not going to be blockbustered or they're not going to be Spotified, and it is going to happen to them. It's going to take a while. And my worry is already there are sort of these crazy billionaire libertarians of Silicon Valley spinning up random social care startups just because they want their mum to go into an experience like Airbnb. That's cool, right? I want that too. But also, where's the democracy and the legitimacy and the quality assurance and all of the beneficial things that government does for us as a collective service? There's a lot of shit it does as well that we could stop it doing, but also it does bring like democratic accountability. So how do we bring these two worlds together? And how do we stop, like there is also this belief that people work in government just for a laugh, or because they're just lazy, or because the government office is near the school where their kid goes to, and it's just nice for them because they can leave at 3:30 and sack it off. Some of that is true, now and again. For the vast majority of public servants, they are there because they really, really give a toss and because they desperately want to change the world. But the problem is that even the most creative people get stuck in these committee processes, and a lot of what we need to bring to them is like a methodology, a way forward. And we get people coming to us and they've read shiny stuff on the internet about change and about service design and about whatever, and about how it was so easy in this organization, or why don't we just have a startup? And they're going, yes, please, but oh my God, do you know what my life is like in this Victorian age institution with like 50, 60-year-old governance structures, and how change can't just happen like that. And so similarly to the other speakers, the way that we approach this is actually sort of multifaceted, and an awful lot of what we see is a start, as in you're either a digital agency that recognizes there's a service in relation to your product, if you're lucky, although a lot of digital that we come across is like, it's a cool idea, so everyone will use it, right? And you're like, no. You only have to care about whether the procurement officer and the chief information officer thinks it's a good idea. Like, it doesn't really matter whether the citizens of Surrey care, because they're not the ones buying it. So there's a lot of complexity even within product, and the same in service. But the real key, the real killer, is how you bring these three things together to say, how do you redesign services that are technologically supercharged and embedded within organizations, and where you're really taking Victorian age organizations and moving them forward. And we talk about how digital is really crucial. Like the guys at GDS talk about digital as a Trojan horse for design rather than the other way around. And because people think digital's cool, because they think they get it, because they've got iPhones, because literally I had somebody once go, I get technology. Look what I downloaded from the App Store yesterday. And you're like, dude, that's the point. 1 billion people can do what you just did. That doesn't mean you understand how the hell it works. And so you actually have to get them thinking more broadly. And so we talk to them about how digital is about all of these things. It's about change, technology, user centricity, being responsive, open network, data-driven. It's a much broader thing than a website or an app. And we've built this model around digital maturity in public services, where we try and move them from sort of paper to paper online, i.e. that crap PDF logo where you have to download it, print it off and send it in, which is essentially distributed printing costs. It's not digital. It's a nice saving though. And then how you get digital, start to think about how do you change the status quo, how do you reconfigure a service, and then how does that all add up to a fundamentally different organization? And so how you get people to understand where they are and where they're going is crucial. A lot of our work is about self-awareness. It's about people coming to us and saying, we want to be digital leaders, and us saying, everybody wants to be a digital leader, but the nature of the word leader is not everyone can be a leader. Let's talk about who you are as an organization and how we move you forward in the right way. Are you about sort of tweaks, transactional improvements, transformations? Are you up for totally switching off a service and starting again from a blank piece of paper? Are you a bit more conservative than that? And so a lot of it's about self-awareness. But we've got this mission that we're on at the moment, which is our major sort of product that we're rolling through the sector, really, which is like essentially about taking it all the way through to its endpoint, which relates a bit to what Joel was talking about earlier. So real persona, different name, of somebody we worked with in one local area where essentially she'd gone from like the life that I would expect many of us in this room to lead, which is privileged, independent, relatively wealthy, decent career, decent degree, everything going swimmingly, to almost overnight everything changing, bedbound because of MS, suddenly having to understand what the hell this thing called government is and what public services are and how she can relate to them in order to help her stay healthy, stay fit, find somewhere to live, get around, and get a job that works for her. And this is just a tiny fraction of wider customer journeys around it. But for the local government nerds in the room, of which I imagine there are many, when you're trying to find a place to live in local government, there are services literally called housing options, housing choices, housing referrals, housing benefits, housing adaptations. What does any of that mean exactly? Like, it's unbelievable. And what we do is we chuck that up on the internet. Go and look at the front page of gov.uk. There is a category called disabled people. What the fuck is that? Like, what happens if you click on it? Do you win a disabled person? Like, do you become a disabled? Like, what is it? It's not anything. It's not a service. It's not a category. It's just describing someone's life. Like, it's mental. And it's the same with like housing referrals and assessments and adaptations. Like, what do these mean to people? So how do you create services in government when actually all they have right now is silos and stuff? And so why not have a find a place to live service? Oh my God, it's so clever of us. Where somebody needs a place to live. And when they see that on the internet, they understand that they might want to click on it because they need a place to live and it might help them. And essentially what we're doing is that spoofing of the GDS model, if they didn't say things like disabled people on their front page, where you're putting the services out there online and helping people through it, but then actually hiding all the complexity and doing all the silo transcending behind digital so they don't have to care about it. They tell their story once, they find out how much money they can have, and they go and get a place to live. But beyond that, that's just still spoofing it. I don't know if you've heard, but we've had this thing called austerity for a little while now. Local government is at the arse end of it and is getting brutalized. Central government has been given £1 billion for digital. Local government has lost £1 billion to deliver services like keeping people alive or finding them places to live, let alone how the hell do they invest in digital in that context? When you're like having to sack your bin men and then some dude comes along and goes, website anyone? It's a bit of a hard sell. And, but because of that, you need to reinvent the organizations. And that means getting into this really grimy stuff, the stuff that like I would never tell my designers at interview. Hopefully I never interview anyone in this room in the future because I'm giving away the secrets, which is, this is the stuff you have to get into. You have to get into like the cultures and the policy crap and the legislation and the financial models and the governance structures. We write job descriptions. We help them interview people. Like, we have to literally be their second person alongside them in order, because we're talking, if you need fast change, which they do, and you need to teach them at the same time, you have to hold them by the hand and support them through that. And that also means hacking your way through some of this stuff. Because we have a belief that if you design services like Find a Place to Live, it will redesign the organization inherently behind it, but you can't be casual about it. You have to be extremely purposeful. You have to stick with it. You can't be a fly-by-night agency. You have to stick with them and be their partners for a long time. And we get into restructuring. Like, we talk about, this is the new shape of your organization. To Joel's point earlier, how do you give somebody the find a place to live service to be the service manager of, so they own the customer journey, and all the structure of the organization falls behind that. So it's not just a website spoofing thing, but the silos change and it becomes a cheaper, more efficient organization as well. So for example, a London borough that we've been working with, this was their lovely 2B customer journey, which we're hopefully going to be implementing shortly, predicated on a very neat business model, which wasn't this neat, but I tidied it up for the sake of this presentation. But essentially, this is the stuff that really matters to them. Like, we don't get the luxury of talking about increasing their sales or satisfaction and net promoter score. We get, this is going to be better, but you're also going to save 30% of your cash. And unfortunately, what that means is, in order to do that, you need fewer people working in your organization. This stuff's hard. Like, and my team, my designers find it really difficult because they're doing the user research with the people that might, in the future, off the back of a service blueprint, not work for that organization anymore. And that is like really hard stuff. And if we just stop at like fairly like, wouldn't it be nice if, or here's a nice app for you, we're not getting anywhere. This is the real lives of the people running these services. And it's sad and it's difficult, but it's the reality. And we have to do this stuff so that they don't switch off entire care home services because they run out of cash. And we do it in a really different and managed way. And I'm going to skip past this, but have a look at Casserole Club, it's lovely. And so my three things is, when we're talking to government, is like, the really key thing is them understanding themselves. It's self-awareness. It's like, don't jump to the shiny stuff, but actually recognize that you're here and you want to get there, but there's actually a couple of steps on the way. So really understand your change readiness. Find the right approach for you. You've heard about the approaches, so that worked well. I don't have to repeat those. And then also make stuff. Like, the most powerful thing that we find as a tool actually is the blend of Agile and design. So show and tells, stand-ups, things where you can actually bring things to life for senior leadership in organizations so they believe that momentum is happening and change is real and that they will get behind it, is the most transformative thing. But above all, like organization design, business redesign, like everything else is just fluff unless we fundamentally change the organizations that we're working with. And come over to the light side, do some government stuff and do it for people like Margaret. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Anyone got any questions for Dom? Yeah.
Hi, I work for a transport innovation centre, and I work a lot with the Department for Transport. What we find a lot of the time is we get, they're very risk averse, and they talk about the daily mail test with everything that you do, and it becomes really difficult to do anything because the culture is just risk averse. How do you manage that? How do you actually get the people to change the way that they approach the problems?
Yeah. Stickability, as they call it in football. Like, actually just like hanging around like a bad smell until they believe that you're real, and then you're not fly by night. So it really is just a time thing, because they're so used to people coming in and out and thinking their lives are easy and whatever. If you just hang out, which I'm sure you do by the sounds of the name of your organization, then they get there in the end. Employing people who often might know some tricks that they don't know in terms of their own legislation or their own approaches to politics or whatever. So I would say I personally know procurement better than almost everybody in local government that I've met. And so I can help them procure in ways that they don't think they can. So if you've always got answers because, if you always know what they're going to say and what the answer is before they say it because you know the legislation or you can find a way around it, then that's a pretty good trick as well. And then looking for like really safe ways to do things as well, like promise to like, you know, not talk to anybody about a project that you're doing, or, you know, we're doing this transport project in Suffolk and Essex at the moment, and we're working with Department of Transport, and they're hopefully going to help us do what we're calling like a no-fly zone or a green zone for policy and legislation, i.e. we get a pass on some bits of legislation for a period of time in order that we can actually test something to see if we can demonstrate it would work and it would be radically different in order that they would then be bothered to rewrite the legislation, because why would you bother rewriting it on a hypothesis? So it's like mutually beneficial. Like we kind of expect this, the legislation doesn't work either, but it's a lot of effort and we've got to sell it to the politicians. Can you prove it for us? And then we'll do the work on our side. So you can kind of barter and do deals as well in that way.
This might be a bit personal, but building what you just said, do you have to adjust your business model or commercial terms if you're looking for projects to be longer or more sustainable in order to deliver long-term impact because of the nature of the work? So normally, you know, it's an 8-week or 12-week project, and also there's a trend, I think, for companies to be taking smaller bets and, you know, chunking things up. So that seems at odds with, you know, the spirit of what you were talking about being in for the long term. So do you find that when you're pitching or dealing with clients, you have to deal with those things up front in order to structure a longer term engagement? Or
so yeah, we probably take a hit because we're FutureGov and we're not FutureOrg that happens to do some gov stuff, which I think is a good approach, and I almost wish I'd done it, to be honest, where we did digital for trainer companies and then could do government stuff philanthropically almost. But instead our entire business model is attached to the pain of government, and as a result of that we have to come up with different tricks to try and make that stuff work. So sometimes it's carrying a project for 3 months without a purchase order and a contract on a fingers crossed promise that that's going to happen because they said it would. And generally people in local government are true to their word and good people, but it fails sometimes and we're left with the cost. There's times where we'll have a risk reward model where they'll retain a certain chunk of the cash until we prove that so we'll run at cost and then get a bonus at the end, which again can be tricky because, you know, setting out what success looks like in an agile and design world is really bloody hard. And, you know, I have experience at the end of last year where we lost some money on that one because the lawyers argued black as white and I ran out of energy first and blinked. So yeah, I'd say it's really hard and you have to be super creative and you've got to be in it for the right reasons because you'd be mad to do it really. And just do it for government rather than spread betting by doing it for other sectors as well. But the credibility it buys you for just focusing on government, and the fact that they know you're in it for the long term because you've been in it for the long term. The fact that about a third of the company is ex-government frustrated bureaucrats who have come out and become super creative, transformed individuals and express their own ability to change government from a different angle is massively rewarding for me as the boss. So yeah, it's more than money. Yeah, definitely. You can make money out of it, but it's more than money.
Yeah. So going on from that, do I get the impression that you don't just bid for contracts, you go along to a local authority you might not have ever been to before and say, we've done something for your neighbouring local authority, maybe we could do something for you?
Yeah, exactly. And
that's very dangerous.
Yeah, for a while, yeah. Well, it's interesting. So we started off as like ideas people, because that was where the market was 9 years ago, where you could just about get the end of year comms budget to give you $5,000 to do something, anything, just to prove a point. And we were like, fine, we'll do anything just to get a logo on our website as a client. And so you'd end up doing reports on 92 ideas about how design and digital can change your council. And after about 10 of those, you're like, for the love of God, this isn't changing anything. So we then used good organizations like Nesta and others who grant fund some of those innovations to actually then build tech product and service around it and try and play them at their own game, because government's brilliant at buying stuff. It's not so good at being patient with invention. So we kind of went, all right, then fine, we'll build some stuff and sell you stuff. And that was expensive and tricky, and we took some investment and got through that. And then we went into let's part the product, the tech product stuff. Let's focus back on where our DNA was, which was about services and redesign of organizations with technology. But again, that was to Joel's point about we did too much double diamondy, like trapped in the first half of the diamond at times. You're just like, we're going to use the research ourselves to death here. And actually now we've kind of balanced all of it and said we've got some products, we've got some previous assets from how we've designed the way special educational needs transport should be delivered as a service in this place. Let's put it on the table and say this is what you've already won. Another bit of government's paid for this. This is your starting point. If you just want this, it hardly costs you anything, we'll just implement it. If it doesn't quite work for your local area and you want us to tweak it, we'll do that. So we're almost like a shared service to local government, the 400 councils, because someone pays us for one thing and we'll let anyone else buy it off us as well and share it about that way. But yeah, so yeah, it's some product, some invention. It's a bit of a mixture, really.
Where do you think we sit in terms of digitising services in from a global perspective? Are there any countries you think stand out as being really good at that?
Yeah, so I would say that we've done a really good game about saying how great we are, which is good. I'd say that we have done some really good stuff. I think we're sort of accelerating past people who probably are ahead of us if we were being truly honest. So I was in Denmark this week and they've just had for ages like an online tax system that just does the work for you and you just click a button saying, I agree, this is the taxes I should pay. And we're making a massive drama about the fact that we're going to have that within the next 5 years. And well, hey, it's really easy to say you're the best if you don't travel. And they've also got online health records, which we've spent billions on and failed at. And even the ones that are live now are a user experience nightmare. So yeah, Denmark's doing an awful lot. America is pretty awful, really awful. Australia was getting its act together and has just committed digital government suicide by decimating its capabilities around that stuff. So I'd say we're sort of top quarter moving at speed. By the middle of the next decade, we'll probably be in the top 2 or 3. At the moment, we talk as if we are, but we're not yet. So.